Try. There we go.
Good morning, and everyone. Welcome to our Builders Call. I'm seeing some new faces, and Sean, welcome. I know you're here for the first time. If you can come on video, anyone that's not on video, we'd love to see you. Doesn't matter what you're doing. We don't care what you look like or what you smell like, because fortunately, that stuff doesn't transfer. However, good to see so many bright and shining faces this morning. Ian, great to see you, my friend. I'm super excited for our call today. We do these calls the first and third Tuesdays of the month for people that are wanting to build mindset and skill set and community shared learning around building an organization here at EXP and best practices. And like anything, skill sets are transferable.
Calling
So the
Walgreens
things that
Services. This
work
is
for
Melissa. Pharmacist, can I help you?
building
Yeah,
a
this is Julie Savy. I stopped yesterday.
also work for your sales business. They work for your personal life. They work for everything because skill sets and principles transfer into all areas of life. So while today we're going to be focusing the conversation primarily around the context of building, meaning using your influence to build people in the context of giving them a place and space within our community to take their careers and their lives to the next level. Think about all the different ways that these things are also applicable. So, as we jump into the conversation today, just a little bit of background on how this came about, and I love how a lot of our conversations come about is through engagement. This one specifically was Kim Renshaw, and we were on a leadership call, and she's like, "Hey, remember that call we did back da 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 da?" She's like, "How did you just get so deep into things, like really getting to the heart of things?" And sometimes I take for granted that the things that are automatic for me that aren't I'm not cognizantly aware that I'm doing just because it's how I operate, because I've done it so many times, are actually things that I have been taught in a formal structure that I've applied and that I've integrated into my business and my life through repetition. So it comes off as natural and just something that I do. And it's like, oh, Casey. And it's the good news is it's not OKC. It's OKC being an integrator on things that she's learned. So this specific conversation that we're going to talk about today are skill sets that I was introduced to 14 years ago and went through a very rigorous integration training with them. So what that looked like specifically, and when you start to think about, well, when am I going to find my groove? When am I going to find, when are my skills going to feel like they're natural? When is it going to feel not so forced or not so mechanical? That's going to be different for every person depending on the level of integration that you're willing to go through. So, the context of what I'm about to share with you today, literally over the course of 13 months, I flew in a day early to Utah for a monthly leadership training that I used to attend. And 25 of our leaders flew in early for that business, a day early to be able to learn these frameworks. And then we had weekly integration calls for the next weeks up until the following month, where we would all fly in again a week early. So we were taught these different frameworks and skills. And then we had 4 weeks to go integrate them at a really high level into live business conversation and then have weekly coaching calls in that integration process. And that we ran that for 2 years. So be patient with yourself is the message to that in the process, because that 2 year commitment of integration is transferred into everything that I do today. And it was not at EXP. It was through New Skin, which is a direct sales company organization, that I started that business in November of 2007. And so when I stopped selling real estate officially in 2009, I spent 13 years in that industry, building into 17 different countries and opening markets and being a full-time professional in that industry. And so a lot of the skill sets that I picked up and things that I was introduced to were during that time. And we worked at a really high level and used those. So the great news is at the beginning of the call, I mentioned everything's transferable. It transfers right into what we do here because we're working with people. And at the end of the day, communication, relationships, your ability to meet someone where they're at, to keep it about them, to stay in your own lane, to hold a boundary, to be a container where someone else can have an experience of you and with you, not from what you're saying, but from how you're being, and you feeling very calm and confident in essentially a process that you're taking each person through without them actually knowing that they're in a process because it feels very natural and it feels very connected. And that is the objective. And to the extent that we all master relational skills, you can do as much or as little business as you want to do for the rest of your life because business is people and relationships. So before we jump in today to the meat of what we're going to cover, I want to pause just for any questions, comments. Hey, can we make sure we add this or anything before we jump in? Nope. All right. Well, thank you so many of you for being on video. It makes it so much more fun for me to be able to see your faces and exchange energy in that way. Okay, so we're going to talk about some concepts. I have a pen and paper next to me. I'm going to invite you to not take digital notes. I'm going to invite you to take pen to paper notes on this one. And the reason for that is there is something that happens in the learning process when you physically write, and the connection of you being able to hear something, transcribe what it's going to look like for you, and then be able to review that going back is very different than a digital process. Or I know we have AI, which is the greatest thing ever. And at the end of this call, within 60 seconds, everyone can get the notes if you have an AI recorder that's going, which is fine as well. However, that's not going to help your integration at all. And so we want to start the integration process right out of the gates as we go into this conversation. So the first thing to understand is I'm going to talk about three different frameworks. And the first framework is this idea of listening in context versus listening for content when you're in a conversation with someone. So for those of you that have been introduced to that concept or that idea, and this will anchor some learning and help you integrate and skill up yourself. Tell me what that means for people that might be hearing that for the first time. What's your understanding of that? Listening in context and for context versus content.
Aren't you referring to the subtle cues that people give, the nonverbal, as well as, whether they're how they're responding, not necessarily what they're saying?
That is a very important thing. That would be a piece of it. Yes, however, something different from the difference of context versus content. All right, so we're going to draw an image so that everyone gets this visually. The language of your mind is images. And how we know it's images is because if I say banana, what comes to mind? Yeah, you're seeing bananas. You're not seeing the letters B-A-N-A-N-A. It's why I can ask you what is on page 99 of the book Think and Grow Rich, and none of you can tell me. Because the mind does not think in words, it thinks in images and pictures. And so, if we want to be most effective with people, this is a cue for creating emotional connection, is speaking in the language of what the mind actually is, which is images. And so, for this content context exercise, I want you to all draw a bowl, like a fruit bowl, on your piece of paper. And then you can put whatever it is that you want into that bowl. You could put some grapes. You could put a banana. Maybe you put an apple in there. All right. So part of what's in your image is content, and the other part of what is in your image is context. So of what you've drawn, what is the content?
Fruit.
The fruit. Thank you, Carol. The fruit is the content. And then what is the context?
Bounty.
The context of what you've drawn in the image would be what? If the fruit is the content, what's the context?
The bowl.
The bowl. Yep, the bowl is what holds the fruit. So let's make this a real life application. Let's say we're working with a buyer or seller, or you're working with an agent that you want to be in business with. In the context of working with a buyer or seller, your needs analysis on what's important to them. Let's say it's a buyer in this instance. I want to live on a court. I want to be near a school, da da da. All of those things, content. But the context of why those things are important is going to be what holds it, and the why is going to be different. So, by way of example, on our sales team, we had someone that went through this process, and they wanted to be on a court. They wanted to be near a school district, although they didn't have children. They could not have a swimming pool, absolutely no swimming pool because neither of them swam. It was in a certain neighborhood for commuting. And all of these things were, oh, it had to be a certain, face a certain direction and have a certain feng shui. And so this was a married couple, right? Each one of them had a different context for what was important for them in the home that they wanted to buy. And the content was also different for them. So think about this when you're talking about business partnerships. Maybe you're thinking independent brokers, people that are running teams, uh, husband and wife couples, partnered couples, whatever that looks like, is everyone's got their own context that they're running at all times, and the content or the things that are important to them for their reasons, right? So a lot of times what we will do, and I say we, including myself, is we will talk to people at the level of content and think that that is building and establishing a relationship because we're finding out what's important to them. And a lot of people stop at the content conversation piece and don't ever listen for or hear the actual context of what's holding it. You're not going to move a human being on content as powerfully as you will move them on context, right? So in the example of the husband and wife that were looking to buy. Hers was 100% around experience. What's it going to feel like to be in the home? What's it going to feel like on the commute every day? What's that feeling going to be? She was the one driving feng shui, right? For her husband or partner, his was how close are we to schools for the children that we don't yet have? Who else lives on the block? And his was entirely around family. So you have two different people that have two different contexts, and then all of this content. And as agents, if we're talking to agents or we're talking to consumers just on the level of content on those items that are important, and we don't understand the context of why and what's holding those things, then we're going to not be as effective as we could be. So, this idea of content and context is really important to begin with. Let's translate that to agent attraction, recruiting, building organizations, whatever the language is that you want to use around that. And so, initially, a lot of conversations happen based on content that we're in conversations with agents with. How much business are you doing? What are the things you're working to improve in your business this year? What did you learn from last year? What's working really well for you right now? What's not working really well? Content, content, content. And if we attempt to influence, recruit, attract from the content space, these are the instances, and we don't move to the context piece. These are instances where now someone else may listen and speak in context to that person, and you go, oh, but wait a minute, I've been talking to this person for 6 months and they just went over here and did XYZ. Well, why is that? That is because you didn't get past the content part of the conversation to the context of what was actually driving them to be able to move and influence them and speak to them from that place. So I'm going to pause to allow some time to digest, to ask questions, or just any ahas thus far as we're laying the foundation. And this is where you would come off mute or throw something in the chat. You all know what to do. I know I wasn't that good, so.
But you were.
No one's hair's blown back.
No,
So by context, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. By context, are you talking about like the feelings behind it, the motivation?
The larger overarching conversation, right? So I'll give you an example in the recruiting context. So when Brent Gove called Rick about EXP back in 2016, He was like EXP, 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 so excited about it. And how many people are with all of this enthusiasm and excitement and energy, right? And Rick's like, no, 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 I'm not interested, not interested, not interested. And so, you know, Brent's like, how could you not be interested, right? If you've talked to people about it and you're not here, like, how is that even possible? And so he asked Rick if he'd ever watched the model explained and seen the plan, the 5-year plan. And Rick's like, what 5-year plan? And that is how Brent got Rick to watch the model explained. And the context of what was actually going on for Rick at that time was, as of 2015, he left 14 years of franchise ownership with 1.4 million in debt in his late 50s, starting over. And he was a small little independent that had one agent in it called the broker, that was a friend of his because he was rebuilding his sales team. That was 2015, and 2016 were the end of 2016. So in content was the initial conversation with Brent. In context is, oh, we've got somebody who is at the end of a runway, career-wise, not the beginning of a runway, just positioning from a time perspective, and a need, a huge need of not just starting from zero, starting from a huge negative with a shorter runway and really having freedom and impact as a driver. So the context that Rick was sitting and living in that Brent then spoke to was the consolidation of what took all of those years to build over the next 5 to 7, utilizing this platform and this community to be able to grow something significant. So the sell more real estate, yeah, he's rebuilding a sales team. Keep more of what you make. Yeah, okay, great. Earn some stock along the way. Well, retirement, right? Retirement was down to zip because of that situation in that time, right? So once he got into a conversation around context, it was different than the content. In a content conversation, you can have resistance, right? Because someone is only thinking in the way that they're thinking in based on what they can see and what they know. In a context conversation, when you're speaking to the bigger picture of like, dude, you're in your late 50s. Do you want to take 20 years? Like, what if you could over the next 5 to 7, right? And be better off than you ever were before and have your family be better off, right? That is a context conversation. It's what holds the transactions, the work, the building of the team, the rebuilding of the team, all of the things. It holds all of those things. That's the context that holds it. So it's the higher level conversation that's a deeper conversation that's really going to move people. All right. So we've got this idea of context and content, and this is the foundation. And so from today forward, my invitation to each of you would be, I'm going to go into every conversation and notice, am I having a conversation in content to check the boxes? Hey, Sean, it's Casey. We haven't talked in a while. Checking on you. How's you? How's life? How's the family? How's business? What's going on? I wanted to invite you to XYZ. We're doing some fun stuff. Content, 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 content. Versus and I may find all of that out. We're going to get into that. Versus a different conversation, which could be, Sean, catch me up on what's happened with you since the last time we talked. And what is the one most meaningful thing that you are working on this year and why? So that is going to open up a context conversation for Sean because it's a bigger picture conversation about his life and what's meaningful for him. Like right out of the gate, just how you position the questions that you ask and the language that you're using. Okay, so moving on from the content and context idea, I'm going to introduce the second piece of what we're going to talk about. And I want you to write down these 3 words: why, what, and how. How's business going? What have you and the family been up to? Why did you decide to add people to the team or take them off the team? All of the questions that we ask in dialogue and conversation with people that start with what and how, and why is a sometimes. The ones that start with what and how are always going to be content questions. Now, these aren't bad or wrong questions. Just know that when you're asking what and how questions, that you're in a content conversation. It can lead you, if you're listening in context, to getting to the context, that driving thing underneath. However, the why, what, and hows, when you ask those questions of someone, when you ask the question why, that you're going to have some kind of a reason, sometimes an excuse, sometimes a justification or an explanation, right? The brain literally, when it's sourcing answers to the questions why, what, and how, is sourcing answers from the part of your mind that's the reason and logic part of your mind. It's where data sits, it's where information sits, it's where the collection of all the important pieces and parts of life and business sit. It is not where feelings sit. It is not where emotions sit. And to the extent that you're able to create emotional connection and feeling with someone else will dictate the level that you will get in conversation with that person and the depth of the relationship that you will be able to create. How many of you knew Rick? Just by show of hands, my late husband, Rick. Okay, how many felt like from being on calls with him or seeing him speak on stage that you knew him? Yeah, all the same hands. He was real, he was authentic, he talked about stuff most people wouldn't talk about. Sometimes that was embarrassing for me. Other times it was funny and entertaining. It was usually always funny and entertaining. However, it was like, yeah, the guy was an open book. And if you spent any time around him or you would run into him personally, how many of you found that you were doing most of the talking because he was so inquisitive about your life? Just by a show of hands. Yeah. So he did because he cared. What most people missed is that he never shared about himself, really. So people felt like they knew him because he was authentic and vulnerable, and he had the ability to do that from stage and when he trained and when he spoke and when he taught. However, the Rick, I would say his sister Debbie knows Rick, and I knew Rick because there was a whole different layer and level of Rick from a context perspective that unless someone really took the time, and probably Paul Sessom, his good friend Paul Sessom, unless someone really took the time, you weren't going to get that part of Rick. Nobody got that part of Rick. And you never even knew that it was there because of how engaging he was with you and your life. And people would say the same things about him. I felt like that he really cared about me and that I mattered every time I was in his presence. And it was a gift that he had about being interested in other people. And what he did so well was he was listening in context when he was talking to you. The content he remembered, and he did have a leg up because he had a photographic memory. And so it didn't matter how much time had passed. However, that was a skill that was also practiced and honed, right? So the ability to be in front of someone, to make it about that person, to hear the content things of what's going on in their life and then get to the underbelly of what the context was that was driving those things. It's why I think he should have been like a dating and relationship coach, because half of his real estate friends, at one time or another, were on the phone with him about their relationships and, personal stuff for that very reason, right? Things that would normally be very private behind closed doors. There was that level of trust. There was that level of credibility because he had mastered a skill set called listening and communicating in context, which could evoke emotion for the person. It could have quite often evoke emotion in him as he was in that conversation, which then just created a deeper connection for either an audience or an audience of one, if that was a coaching client or a friend. So these ideas starting to make sense? Okay, so when we go back to these words, why, what, how, I want you to think about those words as when I'm asking those words, that's great. I'm finding out information and data. However, I'm also operating in a content conversation, not a context conversation. And so we want to create awareness before change, ABC. It's not always be closing. It is awareness before change. So we create this awareness of, okay, I'm gonna create an awareness before each conversation that I go into is I'm going to notice when I'm communicating from and listening in content versus when I'm communicating from and listening in context. I notice this quite often happens with my mom because my mom likes to talk about the weather, what the weather's going to be, if the laundry's been done, all of the content stuff of life. And for her, that's really connecting. And also to know if my laundry's been done and what the weather's happening at my house, right? And so I will find myself sometimes frustrated because that to me feels like small talk. I'm like, who cares about the weather? I don't watch the weather station. I don't look at my weather app. 80% of the time it's wrong. Right? And so here we've got now, this is a perfect example of relationship, right? We've got one person who's creating great connection and meaning through a content conversation and one person who's like, please, can we communicate in context so that or get off the phone, right? Frustration, right? So this is a great example and just an awareness, right, of when are we doing that with people, content versus context. I can change the conversation with my mom immediately and go, Mom, I know the weather is really important to you, and we can for sure talk about that. However, on a scale of 1 to 10, as far as how you're feeling from the surgery that you had recently, like, what's your day today? What are you feeling today? And she doesn't like to talk about what she's feeling because when she's not feeling great, she feels weak. And she doesn't like to feel weak because she feels vulnerable, right? Uh, However, she doesn't have the skill set and she doesn't have the awareness of the difference between a conversation in content and a conversation in context. So the responsibility goes to the person who has that information, which would be you now as you're learning it. And nobody else has to change in your world. The agents don't have to change that you're in conversation with the clients. Nobody in your world has to change anything about themselves for you to create a deeper, more effective relationship with them as you get your skills around communication and listening to an entirely different level, because all it takes is one person to create an entirely different level of or aspect to relationship, which is the greatest news ever. So if you're really committed to it, it doesn't, we sometimes go, well, gosh, if my mom had that skill set, she doesn't need to. I have the skill set. And so the responsibility is on me to navigate through those conversations to create meaningful connection and relationship. And oh, by the way, when she does that, I'm modeling for her an experience of something that she doesn't naturally do on her own and creating a safe space for it to happen and a deepening of the relationship where the feeling is different on the other end of it. So when we talked about the topic for today's call being getting to the heart of the matter, we're moving towards this emotional connection and feeling because a lot of people are not going to go there with you, even when you ask them, how are you feeling? Fine. It's a how question. How's your day going? Great. What's happening? I'm tired. Okay. We get all the surface little contenty stuff, but never what's going on underneath, right? So we've got the content context. You've got your fruit bowl. You've got your bowl of fruit and your fruit. There's your content context. We've got the content questions, which are why, what, and how, that we so often use as defaults to build or establish relationship. And so now we're going to move into the actual feeling piece of it from a human process standpoint. So I want you to write down these 3 words. Actually, I want you to draw a stick figure that actually has a head on it. And I am a fantastic artist, so I will give you this one right there. This is what it looks like. This is a good stick figure. Okay, everybody see that? Got a big bubble head on top with some twig arms and some twig legs. And then right where the body would be, I'm going to have you draw a heart because the heart sits in the body, right? And this is going to be your visual because the mind thinks in pictures for you to create a different level of awareness around what this experience is. So right across the head, I want you to write the word think because all that thinking happens in the brain in a content conversation. Right across the heart, I want you to write the word feel. And then right below the heart, which in stick figure world is actually like the gut or the belly button, I want you to write the word no. And then I want you to notice the different people and different relationships that you have. And I know we're talking about agent attraction. I'm gonna put a button on that at the end. However, we're just focusing on human behavior for right now. Think about the relationships that you have and people and what everyone leads or operates from one of these places as their go-to. So if I am having a conversation with Selena about anything, she's going to tell me what she thinks or what she knows 99% of the time. And because she's a highly competent person, that's how her brain functions. She likes tech, she likes systems, she likes how things work, she likes solving things, she likes checking things off lists and getting things done. She likes helping people. All of those things that, oh my goodness, look at that list. All of those things, I know when I'm going to have a conversation with Selena that she's going to either be in a thinking place because she's contemplating something new about how we can be more efficient and effective in our business, or she's going to be in a knowing place based on this is what I know because I woke up this morning and my AI agent had gone through my email and told me this is what I missed from yesterday and this is what needed to happen today by this time, that time, and that time. So she's very much in a knowing space and not thinking about anything at all. However, what I also know about Selena is that there's the human under there that has a whole ton of life stuff going on. So I will intentionally ask her things that have nothing to do with what she thinks or what she knows. And ask her things in a feeling space based on what I know is going on, or some of the things that I know are going on for her in a personal context behind the scenes, right? And then when Selena talks from that place, often there's emotion. The body language changes. She sits in her chair differently. Sometimes there's tears, even when there's no words. There's the space to feel. And then there's other people who maybe you have some of these kind of people in your life where they live in a feeling space. My friend Beth is like this, and we were recently on a group text together. Sean too. We were recently on a group text, and by Beth's 2-word response, I knew there was a whole thing going on. So I picked up the phone and I called her, and I didn't even get hello out of my mouth, and it's and I said to her, one of the things I love about you is I haven't even had a chance to process this information, and you are already in the what it feels like for you, because that's where you start when you receive information, is the feeling space, right? Because that's her go-to of how she is in her life, right? So the people in your life are going to predominantly process in one of these ways, whether they're thinking about it and analyzing it and giving you some content, whether they're bouncing all over the place like a ping pong ball with their feelings, right? Which can be like, when someone is that, or they're in that space, or when you have people that are just very matter of fact and they don't care how much people are bouncing or how much people are thinking about things. It's like, no, here's what is and here's where we go. Like the end of conversation. Well, what do you feel? Like, what do you feel? I'm not feeling anything about it. I just know this is what needs to happen, right? So we all have like these 3 different, I'm going to call this the processing system of how people process information. They're going to do that in a thinking space, the feeling space, or a knowing space. When we talk about today's conversation, and so I'm going to go back to this image, the think, feel, and know, literally the majority of people, not all people, the majority of people are going to start off in a thinking space. Once they get clear on what they think, they're going to feel it and they're going to be connected. Those 2 things are going to connect. Like, this is what I think and it feels right to me. So those things start to come together and now they have a feeling about it. And once there's a strong enough connection between what they think and what they feel, they will get to that place where, like, no, this is what I know. This is what I know. The majority of people are going to have to go through that process. Fewer people are going to start off knowing, because that's a place that they operate from. Or they may start and go, well, here's what I know, and I'm also open to, well, tell me about this. Right? So they might start in a knowing space and then be open to thinking about something that they could feel differently about, that they could then know differently about and make decision, right? So let's go back to the recruiting conversation. I'm going to use Rick and me as an example. Rick watches the model explained with Brent Gove, and his feelings are all over the map because Rick was such a huge feeler. He calls me, I'm in South America, and he's like, oh my goodness, Casey, I was there for my business. I've been there for 5 weeks. We were working 7 days a week, literally, because we were pre-market launching a tech, and we were looking for business partners that caught the vision of what that tech was going to do in that market. So, like, I kid you not. Well, we're South America, so nothing happens before 10 a.m. However, we go from 10 a.m. till quite often midnight or 1 a.m. and just back to back to back to back to back. And we'd been there for like 4 weeks at this point. I'm tired. Rick calls me and he's excited out of his mind because he's just been on the model explained with Brent Gove. And I have no capacity for these feelings because I'm tired. So what I said to him is, I cannot think about one more thing. I get that you're really excited. Please don't do anything till I get home because brand and brand credibility is everything. And he said, okay, second marriage. I won't do anything till you get home. We'll table the conversation. Smart man. Happy wife, happy life. And so I get home, and then Brent comes to our house on a Friday night at 8 o'clock to have me watch the model explained. Brent's excited. Rick's excited. They're both in their feeling space. And it doesn't matter that they have as much knowing because they're feeling all of the feels about it, right? I get off the model explained and I'm thinking, I'm like, And in my thinking space, I go to what I know based on my years of experience in the industry that I've been in for the last almost 10 years and some of the similarities and crossovers that I was seeing. And I said to Brent, but what about this? And what about this? And what about this? And he said in his feeling space, I don't know, but what about all of this? And so back into the feeling space, right? So I want you all to think about this in the context of recruiting. You can be really excited about what you know, what you've experienced, what you're feeling, and it doesn't matter. It does matter. And it doesn't matter. It matters to the extent of who you're sitting in front of and where they are and who they are. That's when and how it matters. So when we want to become more intentional around this stuff, Brent was very smart. He said, well, I don't know. However, our CEO is going to be in Sacramento next week. Come have lunch and talk to him. Gladly. So I sat at the table next to the CEO at the time, which was Jason Guessing, and I went through all of my questions. Questions about compression in the compensation plan, questions about the cap being 16 and there being 16,000 within all 7 levels and the longevity and the sustainability of it. I asked all of these questions in a thinking space based on what I knew from being in the industry that I'd been in. And the conversation that I had with Jason as he gave me the answers in a thinking space, he was also relationally building relationship because he was sharing things about his family, his journey that in a feeling space connected me to him as a human. So as I was getting all of the thinking pieces that I needed to go through my due diligence process while Rick was already on board and I was not, and he was not moving forward without me, I'm having an experience where I'm going from thinking to feeling to ultimately getting to a place of knowing where I said, Rick, I think it's good. You go focus there. I'm going to stay focused in my business and my career. I'll support you with whatever you need, whatever you want. And so January of 2017, Rick moved his license and then subsequently mine, even though I wasn't selling, to EXP. And that's where the story began. So why I'm telling you this story is the lessons that you can learn from a recruiting perspective based on the knowledge of how people process information from a think, feel, know space. Additionally, being able to get into a deeper conversation around the content because people will talk content, stock, ownership, revenue share, content. There's no context in that. That's content and the ability to listen in context for someone's life, what's going on in their life, and then anchor that content to their context. This is the skill set of recruiting and attraction. Okay, that was a lot of information. I'm going to come up for a breath before we hit it home and how you actually go through the process to get to the feeling space with someone. Questions, comments, ahas, photos you want to share that you've drawn?
This is really helpful. I was just going to say, like, it's making me think through my recruiting experience and joining EXP. And, I shared in the chat that I'm someone that I guess maybe the minority. I start with feel. And, I'm just like relating my experience to this framework that you're sharing with us. And it's really helpful. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And Sean, if your lead for processing is feel, sometimes that can be no. And where it is no is when it comes to deep intuition. So in a feeling space, the feeling is what of all the feels of how this feels. The knowing space is I'm taking all of those feelings and now I have a deep knowing that is going to move and drive me to action.
Got it. Okay. I feel like it's more feel and then go into deep overthinking, and it's like a crazy hot mess. And then I get to know, but that makes sense.
Yeah, and that can happen too, right? So everyone's going to go through their own process, which is going to be always an individual process. So when we want to, a lot of people will go, well, what are the steps? Well, I do this step and then that step and then that step. And it's like, well, people aren't steps, people are people. So when you understand this framework around how people take in information, process information, and ultimately create movement or don't create movement, and why there's not movement, when there's not movement. This gives a different view into that. Jackson.
Hey, so when I'm going through this, I really heavily lead on getting to know them, right? Just finding out everything about them. And so as you're going through, if you're into, I guess the thing I'm looking for is trying to, as you're going through these conversations with them, figuring out, are they going to be emotional? Because a lot of times I come in because I was on the commercial referral, I was on residential, but I lead with business brokering of things I do in commercial. It's where I'm at, but it also seems to be, it opens doors pretty quickly for me because I think it's unknown for them, and I do a lot of private money and investing in VC, so very business minded. I try to go after business minded people to stay in that thing, but you don't always get thinkers in that because there's also a lot of emotional people there. So if you're going through and you're trying to figure out who they are, like what are some, I guess, indicators on a simple level to see where they are when it comes to this?
Great, great question, and a lead in to the final thing I'm going to teach today.
Ha!
Before I go there, and thank you for bringing that up and sharing it. Before I go there, is there anything else anyone wants to share, ask?
I'm
Okay.
sorry. I have one more thing. I'm
Yes.
just it's also I'm also thinking of like how to take this and use it to get from content more to context with clients. So different conversation than the recruiting topic, but I'm just kind of thinking about that too.
Okay. I'm going to model it for you right now. So if we go back to what we've talked about so far, we've got the bowl and the fruit, content and context. We've got why, what, how, which are content questions. With the exception of why, I'm going to show you an example of how why can be both. And then we've got this processing system of thinking, feeling, knowing. So I want you to all think about yourselves as facilitators of experiences. And if someone was to ask you what you do, you facilitate experiences. You're going to facilitate an experience for someone in a buying process. You're going to facilitate an experience for someone in a selling process. You're going to facilitate an experience for someone in a commercial investment process. You're going to facilitate an experience for someone that's an agent that is looking for something more, better, or different in their career or their life. You are the facilitator of experiences, and how you facilitate experiences is going to be contingent on how you facilitate conversations. And so the facilitation of a conversation, when you change it, we think about, people do business with whoever they know, like, and trust. Okay, great. And then there's things we've been taught in the industry. Well, just have a conversation with them. That's the Ford conversation: family, occupation, recreation, dreams. And that establishes relationship, and that you care, and then you can create some commonalities and share things that you may have in common based on what they share with you. And these are our clunky, archaic relationship, building conversation tools. And do they work? To an extent, they do. However, to an extent. So there's a deeper level to go with them. And today's conversation is really about that deeper level. So, not negating any of those things, they work for what they are. And when you want to take things to a deeper level because you want to move people or move more people or move people faster or move them at a higher level or move a higher caliber of person, it requires a different level of skill set to be able to do that. So, Sean, I do not know you before today. I'm meeting you for the first time on this call. I did get a heads up. Linnea told me you were coming, so I said I will look for him. And here you are. So I love that she set the expectation that you're going to be here and you showed up. This is great. You're already building credibility with me, even though I don't know you. And like, oh, someone who did what he said he was going to do. This is fantastic. I'm going to facilitate what this conversation looks like for everyone to see. And I'm going to use, I want you to watch, listen very carefully for what each of you notice. I'm going to ask each of you to be an engaged listener in this conversation. I'm going to invite each of you to listen from context. And in the listening from context, there's going to be words or things that he says that has different energy or emotion to it, that I want you to note what those things are as you hear them in the conversation and like physically write them down. And then I want you to notice some things that repeat through the conversation that I'm facilitating with Sean. Okay? Are we ready?
Oh, now I'm in the hot seat.
It's going to be really fun.
Let's go.
It's going to be really fun. Okay. So, Sean, since you and I are just meeting for the first time, tell me what would be the most important thing that you want me to know about you. Tell me the most important thing you want me to know about you.
Oh, um, I guess the most important thing to know about me is that I value, I think, kindness and authenticity over anything else.
Okay, great. And tell me about what brought you to this conversation and being on this call today.
Well, I was talking with Linnea yesterday. I'd actually texted Linnea and I said, hey, even though I'm brand spanking new to the industry and EXP, like when can I start recruiting? Because I've got friends, I've got agents I'm meeting and building connections with, and do I need to be able to mentor those people? Because I'm so new, I can't really mentor anyone at this point. But my experience here has been so amazing that I want to share that journey with other people, and I don't want to waste any time helping bring people in.
Okay. So recruiting for most people is not something they are excited to jump into, and clearly that is not your experience. So tell me about that.
Well, I
I'm
am
excited with the process of recruiting.
I guess I mean, it comes naturally. So I left corporate America. I left a recruiting job to come to real estate. So I spent the past 15 years in HR, was a junior executive with Disney, leading talent acquisition teams. And, that's kind of been something that's been prevalent throughout my whole career, is just connecting with people, being a guide, being a consultant, advising. And so uh I think naturally, like my mind is just going to how can I connect people to an amazing opportunity, and that's I guess just naturally kind of how I operate.
Okay. And to connect people to an amazing opportunity means that you've seen an amazing opportunity. So tell me about what it is that you've seen that
Yeah.
feels.
Well, when I've been wanting to make the move to real estate for a long time. And that's like such a huge change to make, right? Going from regular pay, an industry where you know it like the back of your hand. You are the expert into something that's, irregular, not guaranteed, something completely new. I just turned 40. Am I going to make this change at this point in my life? And coming to EXP, it was the only brokerage that I met with, honestly. I've known Linnea for a long time. I reached out to her first to say, hey, tell me about what you have going on, where you're at. She connected me with someone who is now my lead here in the market that I'm operating in. And like just the immediate first impression from day one was authenticity, super genuine person and kind and like super supportive. So it's kind of like walked me through the approach of, you know, we as a team operate in a way that we care about everyone's success. You have a network around you that's invested in your success. Um, we're handling a lot of the technical aspects, so you don't have to come in and be an expert in writing your own offers. And like, we're going to teach you all of that, but these things are, things that you're going to have a lot of support on. So I just felt like I would have a lot of resources and support as a newbie.
Okay, cool. So it's a huge thing to go from, a career that you've been in, for years to being at 40 years of age and starting over in a new industry.
Yeah.
And generally, people make changes because there's a pain that they're getting away from or an opportunity that they see that they're moving towards. Tell me about what moved you.
What moved me was there's so many aspects about my job and my career that I loved, which was the human connection piece, the guiding, the connecting, the opportunity. And then there was a piece that I did not love, which was being sitting in rooms with executives all day, every day, being attached to my computer screen all day, no breaks, meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting, not being able to like get up, go out into the world. And so I think like I was moving away from sitting in rooms with executives where the human aspect of it, kind of was less important. And also just, something where it felt more natural. Like the idea of getting out, meeting with clients, going and touring homes, getting up out of the chair, just seemed like so much healthier for me than sitting in my chair at my desk looking at a screen all day.
So what I'm hearing you say is that you were moving from a caged animal to some freedom and flexibility in your life.
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Ding, ding, ding. Context. People, everyone, context.
That was beautiful.
So I use the words tell me about so that I get an open-ended whatever he wants to share. I started off with, and I'm just for the sake of time, I would normally have you all be sharing on this part. However, I'm going to anchor what the key points were so that you get them in a learning context because we have another call at the top of the hour. So I started off very intentionally and I'm gauging where he's going to go in the think, feel, know space when I say, tell me about, we're just meeting for the first time. Tell me what's the most important thing for me to know about you. What do you want me to know about you? Right. So I'm asking him a question and his answer went to feeling. He went to, well, kindness and authenticity. Right. So I already know that I've got somebody that I'm going to relate with and be relating with in a feeling space. So I'm listening now for the feelings of, okay, what are the feelings that came up? Well, he's talking about guide and connect are words that he used multiple times as it related to what he was doing. And then genuine, kind, and supportive are words that he used around his experience with Linnea and the conversation about real estate. So these are all feeling words. So I know that he processes very much in a feeling space. And now if we're listening in context and I know that that's going to be the feeling, I'm looking for what is the context that is the driver that's moving him to take a different set of action or a different course of action. And so I introduced the idea of people not making change unless they're getting away from pain or they're moving towards opportunity. And now we're in a thinking space again. What was that for you? I'm specifically using the what because it's not the what is going to lead me to the feeling. So his answer talked then about sitting in meetings with executives and the experience of that. I'm not listening for the content of the sitting of the meetings and executives. I'm listening for the feeling that that was creating. And what I'm hearing as I'm listening in contact is that he felt trapped and he felt caged and disconnected, right? Because the human aspect, he said in his own words, he was losing the human aspect. Versus what he saw and the ability in real estate is to be out, to be meeting clients. The opposite of being caged. What's the context of that? The context of that is freedom. So now when I say back to him, so it's really about going from being caged to being free, to having freedom and flexibility. He's like, ding, 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 ding. I just hit the lottery with him because I have the ability to listen in context, to get to what the feeling is that's driving him and his motivation, put it in words that were not necessarily my words, but ones that I could communicate to him that resonated to him based on what he was saying and everything that he just shared. And we did that in 6 minutes. And I'm running a process. Can you see the process? This is one example. And this is where recruiting, building an organization, working with people can become so fun because now I didn't know Sean before today, and I know everything I need to know about Sean now as a result of him being on this call and us sharing these brief moments of time. I know that his driver is freedom and flexibility, and that it's very much in a feeling experience from having a kind and authentic experience. It's really about connecting with people and helping people. I know everything I need to know about him right now. So for those of you that are like, how do I create value? How do I create value? And I need to go sit with someone for 3 hours. No, you do not. I need to set, I need to put him on an email drip campaign for 6 months before we meet. No, you do not. What there is when you want to do that and move people is understand that at all times you can be listening and communicating in content or context. Check yourself on which one you're doing. When you're using the words what and how, use them strategically. Tell me about what you were doing. La 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 la, right? When I used why, the why is down here around being caged versus being free. And the why was, I didn't say why. I said people move away from pain or towards opportunity. I didn't say, why did you decide to go into real estate or why did you change, right? I gave them a direction to go. Was it away from pain or was it towards opportunity? And I'm getting the why without asking why. I'm keeping him in a feeling space where he's going to communicate from a feeling space versus necessarily a content space. So I can grab that based on how I'm facilitating the conversation. This is actually an all-day training that we have just crammed into 59 minutes. So thank you all for being here. We will put the recording up on the Empire Builders Pro resources site. We are doing a retreat for recruiting, attraction, and building that's starting this Friday and Saturday. If you have not yet committed to coming, you are welcome to get yourself into Monterey and over here to Pacific Grove. We are going in the deep end of the pool for 2 days on how to do all of this stuff and more. So great seeing all of your faces. Appreciate each and every one of you. Nice to meet you, Sean. Thank you for being willing to engage at the level that you were today. And we will talk soon. Bye.